Salam ala Rasulina Nabiyina Maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Rabbi ishrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan fi lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbana zidna ilman, hikmatan, ihsanan wa imanan. Today's topic is one I'm very excited for. And Abid has said I need to contain my excitement and not shout too much. So inshallah, I'll do my best to keep it under wraps. So I'm going to start with a quote. This is from Allama Iqbal's diary. 15th May 1910. Yesterday morning at about 4 a.m., I saw that glorious visitor of our hemisphere, known as Halley's Comet. Once in 75 years, this superb swimmer of infinite space appears on our skies. It is only with the eyes of my grandsons that I shall see it again. The state of my mind was quite unique. I felt as if something indescribably vast had been closed up within the narrow limits of my clay. Yet the thought that I could not see this wanderer again brought home to me the painful fact of my littleness. For the moment, all ambition was killed in me. I remember reading this a few years back, and it's always stayed with me. Iqbal lived in the early 20th century, and this is a time of incredible human technological advancement, scientific advancement, incredible change on all fronts. And the change is so rapid, right, that Allama Iqbal is born 2 years before the invention of the light bulb. And a few years after he dies, mankind has split the atom and have invented rockets. Think about that. In the space of 60 years, human society goes from discovering electricity, utilizing, harnessing electricity, to getting ready to go to the moon. So, being in this milieu really it has an impact on Iqbal. And we see it in his poetry in ways that we don't see in other poets before him. So Iqbal combines traditional motifs. He talks about, the garden and the flower and the tresses of the beloved and the candle and the moth, all these traditional motifs of poetry. And then he also talks about stars and galaxies, and he combines the two. And this synthesis is reflective of who he was and reflective of who we are as Muslims living in the 14th century of the Muslim Ummah. In fact, I was looking up, putting together different poems where Iqbal evokes space and evokes cosmic metaphors, and there were no less than 15 or 20 poems that just had that the titles had star in them. So it's a very common and beloved motif on behalf of Allama Iqbal. And we live in an age, like I've played, for example, so many video games. I've watched a lot of sci-fi. I'm sure you all have. Books like Dune, Star Wars, Star Trek. All of these different forms of very popular media reflect mankind's interest and sort of almost obsession with stars and the space that really solidified at the time Allama Iqbal was alive. So on one level, the use of the cosmic, right, is a really powerful aesthetic tool. These are really powerful and evocative motifs. So let's read our first poem and we'll get a feel for what I mean here. So Iqbal says in a poem, Questions to the Departed, he says, Mehre roshan chup gaya, uthi nikabe ruए शाम, शानाए हस्ती पे है, बिखरा हुआ गैसुए शाम. ये सियाह पोशी किसी ये स्याहपोशी की तारीकी किसी के गम में है, महफिल कुदरत मगर खुर्शीद के मातम में है. The sun's light has dimmed, evening's veil has lifted, evening's locks of hair lie spread upon the shoulders of the earth. This black dress is indeed in mourning of someone, for nature's assembly gathers in the sun's lament. So Iqbal here combines metaphors of feminine beauty and the sun and sunset and sun rising in a way that evokes feelings of loss and lament. It's very powerful, it's very beautiful. Further on, he writes, नादानी है ये गिर्द ज़मीन में तौफ़े कमर का, समझा है कि दरमां है वहाँ दाग जिगर का, बुनियाद है काशाना आलम की हवा पर, फरियाद की तस्वीर है करता से फिजा पर. How foolish is the moon! It circles and orbits, going on believing the earth will heal the scar on its heart. This world is but a hut built upon the winds. It is but a picture of lament drawn across the canvas of space. Aha. So, beyond aesthetic reasons, again, these cosmic metaphors are very powerful. And beyond being really fascinated by space, so Iqbal engages with, at his time, fresh and emerging theories of time and space. If you read his works, he's sitting there thinking about Albert Einstein's theory of relativity and this scientist and that scientist, and he's trying to understand or re-understand Islam with a modern scientific and psychological vocabulary. So he's fascinated by space, and it's a powerful metaphor. But is there a deeper reason why Iqbal also uses these cosmic metaphors? Let me tell you why Iqbal doesn't use these metaphors. So this is why he doesn't use them. When we think of space today, as I intimated prior, we think of it largely in the context of space exploration and colonization and sci-fi and technological advancements. By the way, has anyone here played the new game Starfield? I don't know. I don't have an Xbox, so I'm deprived of it, unfortunately. But space, right, for the last 100 years has been seen as the latest battleground in mankind's struggle against nature, the next step in the progression of the human race, a test of our mettle and merit. We're all familiar with this kind of discourse, right? One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, as Armstrong said. One of the central myths of modernity has been the story of progress and development and advancement. And these are like the kalimas of modern civilization. These are like the mantras of modern civilization, right? But Iqbal actually is not very impressed by this. In a poem titled The Human of the Modern Age, he says, عشق ناپید و خرد می گزدش صورت مار گرچه در کاسه زر لعل روانی دارد. Ishq has fled from him. From who? Modern man, right? Ishq has fled from modern man. And his wisdom, his aql, his rationality, stings him like a snake, bites him like a snake, again and again, in ways that he couldn't have foreseen. Even though his goblet runs rich with red wine. What does this mean here, goblet running rich with red wine? What is this an ishara, a metaphor towards? Mm-hmm. Anyone else? I like it. I read it as him being rich. Yeah. Like he's wealthy. Modern man is richer than ever before, more comfortable than ever before. So the goblet is full and rich, and yet his own aql keeps attacking him in ways he couldn't have foreseen. This is Persian, obviously. Hopefully it's obvious that it's Persian. It's from Iqbal's Persian poetry, and he's put it here at the start of this poem. Then he says, Aqal ko tabe farman nazar kar na saka. So he takes the first line of the Persian poetry, and then he adds it to a line of Urdu poetry. So, Ishq has fled from him, and his wisdom stings him like a snake, yet he couldn't reconcile his rationality to the commands of nazar. So nazar means sight, but I think what Iqbal here means is actually inner sight. So modern man, the modern human is obsessed with rationality, but he can't quite seem to align it with his inner sense of being, right? His inner ruhaniyat, his inner spiritual sense, or his or her inner spiritual sense. And of course this explains why in a society richer than ever, more peaceful than ever, it's more depressed and distraught than ever. ढूंढने वाला सितारों की गुजरगाहों का अपने अफकार की दुनिया में सफर ना कर सका. He tracked the pathways of the stars, yet he couldn't traverse the world of his thoughts. अपनी हिकमत के खम पेच में उलझ ऐसा आज तक फैसला नफा और ज़रर कर ना सका. Entangled in the labyrinth of his own wisdoms, yet still unable to account for what is benefit and what is loss. जिसने सूरज की शुआओं को गिरफ्तार किया, जिंदगी की शब तारीख सहर ना कर सका. He took captive the rays of the sun, but couldn't bring about dawn in the dark night of life. Subhanallah. So, let's talk about a recent event that's happened. The recent landing of a robotic rover on the moon is a matter of pride for India, the nation state of India, and undoubtedly so, right? The country has come so far, especially in the last 30 years. And there are a lot of lessons to learn, especially for next door neighbor Pakistan. You know, हमारे झंडा पर चांद सितारे हैं, पर भारत ही चांद सितारे पर पहुंच चुके हैं ना. One country has reached the moon and the other country is sinking in a storm of its own making. Yet from another angle, I think we have good reason to remain cynical about these sorts of technological and scientific feats, especially when they are disconnected from an ethical framework. So modern India, for example, is hurtling on this path of, you know, Hindutva fascism, and the medium to long-term trajectory is going to be the mass expulsion or genocide of its Muslim population. Like, seriously. It's very concerning, right? And not to mention the boot kept firmly on the neck of Kashmiris for the last 30 or 40 years. And more broadly, we live, you know, in a world of rapacious capitalism and stunning income inequality and roiling imperialism. Millions and millions of people are refugees and have had to flee their homes because of wars that they had no part in making. So who cares about rockets to Mars or rockets to the moon or submarines to the Titanic? It feels like a charade. If we can't fix our problems here on Earth, what business do we have polluting the stars? On this topic, the Urdu poet Ahmed Faraz has a very relevant couplet that was written when America first went to the moon. And when America first went to the moon in '69, it was also embroiled in a brutal and useless imperialist war in Vietnam. So Ahmed Faraz sees this and he expresses, he says, "Aaj ki shab mere सीने पे वो काबिल उतरा जिसकी गर्दन पे दमकता है लहू भाई का." Tonight that Qabil has landed on my chest. The blood of his brother is fresh upon his neck. So this couplet, by the way, is talking from the perspective of the moon. So the moon says, آج کی شب میرے سینے پہ وہ قابیل اترا جس کے گردن پہ دمکتا ہے لہو بائی کا. It's so evocative. Imagine Qabil. Qabil, of course, is the son of Hazrat Adam. And Faraz here evokes the story of Habil and Qabil, the two sons of Hazrat Adam. One kills the other out of jealousy. And it's the first murder. It's in a sense, you could call it the second sin of humanity. After, of course, Hazrat Adam and Hazrat Uva disobeying God in heaven and being cast down. This is in a sense the second sin. And it's a reminder to us that the real struggle of humanity is not against the stars or not against nature, but it's against the darkness of our own selves. There's another couplet here by Faraz. He says, Bastiyan chand sitaron ki basane walon, kurraye arz pe bujate chale jate hain chiragh. I love the movement that Faraz creates in the second line of this poem. Kurraye arz pe bujate chale jate hain chiragh. It's so evocative. These settlers seeking to alight the moon and the stars, they are the same ones who go about smothering lamps here on earth. So, Iqbal is saying here, and our tradition says here, our poetic tradition, our ethical tradition in Islam says that what matters more than any external feat is our internal state. I think what Iqbal does is that in the vastness of imagination that he invites us to share in reflection on, in his use of cosmic metaphors and symbolism, this is actually an invitation to seek the vastness and depth that lies within us. It's not actually about going out there, but it's about going within. Iqbal wants us to reflect deeply on the world, on the cosmos, and on ourselves. The Muslim isn't just one who prays and says shahada and wears a topi. The Muslim is one who engages in muraqibah, musahiba, tadabbur, tafakkur, ta'ammul, right? Self-accountability, self-reflection. I'm trying to think of the translations of tafakkur, ta'ammul, and tadabbur in English. Rumination and reflection and deep ponderment upon the self. These are the necessary qualities of the Muslim who's on the path to ethical perfection. And if there are Muslims who are not engaging in these practices, who are not doing this, then something's gone wrong somewhere, right? So let's look at some examples of the deep reflectivity that Iqbal wants to trigger and foster in his readers by his use of cosmic imagery. The first one here is from his poem Chand. मैं मुज़तरिब ज़मीन पर, बेताब तू फलक पर, तुझको भी जुस्तजू है, मुझको भी जुस्तजू है. Upon this earth I remain unsettled, and upon the skies, O you, the moon, you too remain perturbed. You are on a quest, I too am on a quest. In the introduction to his epic Farsi poem Javed Nama, Iqbal says, Khayal man ba tamashay asman bood ast, ba dosh ma o ba aghosh kashkashan bood ast, guma mabar ke hami khakdan nashiman mast, ke har sitara jahan ast ya jahan bood ast. My thoughts soar to the spectacle of the skies, upon the moon's shoulders and the embrace of the galaxy. Don't for a moment assume that this world or this grave or this dustbin, khakdan can mean all of these, is our abode. For every star is a world unto its own, or has been a world. Javed Nama itself is a perfect case study of Iqbal's use of cosmic metaphors. It's in Farsi, Unfortunately, my Farsi isn't good enough to actually read it, and I can't, do a full exposition. But Javednama is basically, in a sense, it's inspired by the Miraj of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who goes to heaven, to the heavens, and at different stages he meets different people, different personalities, different prophets. It's a very powerful narrative, and it's inspired poets and writers all throughout history. So in Javednama, Iqbal also goes on a journey to the heavens, and he's guided. So Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is guided by Jibrail, right? But Iqbal is guided by Maulana Rumi. And in each chapter of Javednama, he visits a different planet. He goes to the moon, then Mercury, Mars, Saturn, Venus, Jupiter. Each chapter is a different planet, and there he meets different historical personalities. People like, for example, Ghalib or Nietzsche or Goethe or Jamal Afghani, different spiritual and political and philosophical figures in human history. And of course he uses them as a motif to talk about the various issues that interest him and he wants to talk about. The state of the Muslims, the state of the heart, what needs to happen, where we need to go, this sort of thing. It's a beautiful, beautiful narrative. But ultimately this journey through the stars is a journey through the self. Inshallah, one day when my Farsi is good enough, we'll do a lecture on Javednama. Give me a year, inshallah. Let's keep going. In his poem Subh or Dawn, Iqbal says, ये सहर जो कभी फरदा है, कभी है आमरोज, नहीं मालूम कि होती है कहाँ से पैदा, वो सहर जिससे लरजता है शबिस्तान वजूद, होती है बंदा मोमिन की अज़ां से पैदा. This dawn of today that shifts so quickly to tomorrow, from where it comes, no one knows. But that dawn, which shakes this dark abode of existence, from the azan of the mu'min, it is born. So Iqbal loves talking about existence as a dark abode. We're getting this, consistent metaphor here. And he always talks about the stars as, of course, the lamp and the light. And dawn is a very, very commonly used motif in his poetry. होती है बंदा मोमिन की अज़ां से पैदा. आगे जाते हैं. He has in another poem called Miraj, Iqbal says, नाविक है मुसलमान, हदफ उसका है सुरैया, है सिर्र सिरा पर्दाए जान नुक्ताए मेराज. तू मानी व नजम ना समझा तो क्या अजब है तेरा मद व जज़र अभी चांद का मोहताज. The Muslim is a sailor and his destination is Suraya. So Suraya is like the brightest star in the sky. The secret of his station, the veil of the heart, the destination of Miraj. I don't really know how to translate this line. By the way, all these translations are mine. I didn't know how to translate this. It's such a Ghalib-esque line of poetry that you just have to sort of sit with it and just take in the imagery. You can't really translate it or make a proper sentence out of this one. That the meaning of one najam eludes you is no cause for astonishment, for your ebb and flow is still tied to the moon. So one najam, of course, is one of the famous early verses of the Quran. So the Quran in its early stages of revelation makes frequent use of, again, cosmic metaphors. وَالشَّمْسُ وَالضُّحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا وَالنَّجْمِ, and other beautiful and profound examples. So here that the meaning of essentially the Quran eludes you is that shouldn't be no surprise, because you still haven't gone beyond the physical, essentially, is one way to read it. You still haven't gone beyond the world that is. You haven't quite seen the world that is beyond. Let's read another poem, Haqiqat-e-Husn. We'll read it in full. When I first talked about Iqbal in a public setting, this was in 2017, I just talked about this poem, Haqiqat-e-Husn, and I remember I couldn't read the Urdu and I had to use a transliteration. And I was so frustrated by the translation. I was like, this is such an obtuse and difficult translation, but how am I ever going to explain the beauty of what's happening here? And so I'm really happy, alhamdulillah, on a personal note, that some years later, I've written my own translation, and hopefully it gets across kind of what Iqbal was trying to say. So Iqbal says, Khuda se Husn ne ek roz ye sawal kiya, jahan mein kyun na mujhe tune lazawal kiya, mila jawab ki tasveer khana hai duniya, शब बेदराज अदम का फसाना है दुनिया, हुई है रंगे तगय्युर से जब नामूद उसकी, वही हसी है हकीकत ज़वाल है जिसकी. Beauty asked God one day this question: why did you not make me in this world undying? The answer came, a picture house is this world. The story of a long night of nothingness is this world. Beauty only emerges from the color of change. That is only beauty whose essence knows decay. Iqbal loves setting up dialogues between two concepts. It's a common theme in his poetry. So here, beauty and God are in dialogue. Other poems have the moon and the firefly in dialogue, for example, or the sun and the stars in dialogue, or the heart and the mind in dialogue. It's a really beautiful motif he uses again and again. So this is an example of that. कहीं करीब था ये गुफ्तगू कमर ने सुनी, फलक पे आम हुई अख्तर सहर ने सुनी. सहर ने तारे से सुनकर सुनाई शबनम को, फलक की बात बता दी ज़मीं के महरम को. भर आए फूल के आंसू पयाम शबनम से, कली का नन्हा सा दिल खून हो गया गम से. चमन से रोता हुआ मौसम में बहार गया, शबाब शेर को आया था सोगवार गया. The moon stood near and overheard this dialogue, and these words took flight upon the sky and reached the morning star. Dawn learned of this too and informed the dewdrop. Heaven's dialogue had reached all the way down to this confidant of the earth, the dewdrop. And at the dew's report, the flower's eye teared, and the flower bud's tiny heart throbbed with grief. Spring fled from the garden weeping, and those youth who had come there to wonder and play turned instead to mourning. So this is a reflection, of course, on the nature of beauty, the nature of change, and decay. Iqbal says, we can really only appreciate something if we know that its time is limited. And our time is limited, and everything we see around us, its time too is limited. So the moment is one who has a deep understanding and appreciation of this universal truth. In expressing this point, Iqbal again makes use of cosmic imagery, and it's so striking, and it's so vivid, and it's so profound. Let's finish with one last poem. This is one of Iqbal's most famous poems. There are hundreds of millions of people in the world, and definitely in the subcontinent, who speak Urdu or have an understanding of Urdu. And you can bet almost all of them know at least the first line to this poem. सितारों से आगे जहां और भी हैं, अभी इश्क के इम्तिहान और भी है, तही जिंदगी से नहीं ये फ़ज़ाएं, यहाँ सैकड़ों कारवां और भी हैं। क़नाअत ना कर आलम रंग व बू पर, चमन और भी आशियाँ और भी हैं। अगर खो गया एक नशिमन तो क्या गम, मकामात आह व फ़ग़ां और भी है। तू शाही है परवाज़ है काम तेरा, तेरे सामने आसमां और भी हैं। इसी रोज़ व शब में उलझ कर न रह जा, कि तेरे ज़मान व मकां और भी हैं। गए दिन के तन्हा था मैं अंजुमन में, यहाँ अब मेरे राज़दां और भी हैं। Beyond the stars, more worlds await, more tests of ishq await. This vast cosmos does not lack life, for here hundreds of other caravans await. Do not be content with the world of color and smell, for other gardens and other nests await. Why grieve if one loses their refuge? For other places to cry, other places to sigh await. You are an eagle, to soar is your vocation. Before you other skies await. Let not the cycle of mere night and day ensnare you, for other times, other places await. Gone are the days when I was alone amidst the assembly, for here, now, many of my confidants await. Allahumma ya fatir as-samawat wal-ard, anta waliyyi fi ad-dunya wal-akhirati, tawaffani musliman, walhiqni bis-salihin. And with that we'll finish. If anyone has any thoughts or reflections or comments, please do share. I have little more to say. I think little more needs to be said from my part. I hope you can feel. So in previous sessions, we discussed Iqbal's thoughts on Western civilization and the decline of the Muslim world. These are important and powerful topics, but this is the Iqbal that also needs to be seen and understood, this deep, thoughtful, profound soul, inviting us to go within the depths of our own selves. Yes.
Yeah, that's really brought forth, I think, in the reality of beauty, where you have this contrast between this big cosmos, universe, the moon, the sun, its beauty, its extravagance, and that comes all the way down to this dewdrop, which informs the flower, and then the heart of the flower. And then the youth who then mourn that time is indeed short.
Yes.
It's indeed.
Yeah. Subhanallah. He takes us on this journey from the heavens all the way right down to the flower bud. And this is the journey he wants us to also engage in as well. Inshallah. Yes.
Sorry. So in the last few lines, like the idea of the confidants, is that referring to like people who pass on? And
it's actually referring to people who now understand Iqbal's poetry. So he wants to inculcate his philosophy, or he wants more and more Muslims and youth to understand what he's saying and change and take the message forward. So the confidants are the people around him. Yes. Anyone from the back? Ji. Mm-hmm.
But in a way, a lot of the poetry is like sharing with us how we're all connected. when you actually compare it,
Hmm.
see how it is to recognize that how some like the youth they get affected by it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Something to reflect on a bit on.
Hmm.
Whatever gets affected is also affecting us.
Right. Right.
And also noticing that in a lot of poetry as well,
Uh-huh.
especially in the Urdu poetry.
Uh-huh.
This one.
जी.
तो शाहीन है परवाज़ है काम तेरा
Hmm.
तेरे सामने आसमां और भी है.
Hmm.
This word like this eagle, you are an eagle. Iqbal uses this for a young Muslim
Hmm.
man, Muslim woman.
Or any Muslim really, essentially, but he's one of his favorite motifs, the eagle, and he uses the metaphor of the eagle in its literal and its sort of metaphorical and its spiritual sense. So one of his couplets says, when we discussed this in the first nashist, परवाज़ है दोनों की इसी एक फ़ज़ा में करगिस का जहाँ और है शाहीन का जहाँ और. Though they share the same skies, the vulture and the eagle are worlds apart. And the vulture, of course, is a wretched animal, feeds on carcass, and the eagle is, of course, a universal metaphor for nobility. The eagle searches out and finds its prey with action and determination and decisiveness, and the vulture waits for the work of others and comes in and, nibbles away. But what Iqbal is really saying is that the Muslim needs to be, of course, like the eagle, decisive, noble, proud. But he's also saying something else. There's a third layer. All of our traditional poetry has multiple layers. When they talk about the beloved, it is the physical beloved, but it's also the spiritual beloved. Here in this couplet I'm reciting to you, the Shaheen is the Muslim who is able to control his nafs, who is able to raise him or herself. And the vulture is that person who is a slave to their nafs. So Iqbal, yes, loves the motif of the eagle, the Shaheen.
Is there in the last poem, it's very beautiful, is there like an objective, like, is he trying to get like an objective meaning across, or is it like open to interpretation? Because the way I view it, like, I don't know, it's pretty like basic interpretation, but he's just like talking about Jannah when he says, like, we think like this dunya is like so big and open and we can do so much, but Jannah is the real sky. Or when he says, don't let the cycle of me and day and night ensnare you, that Allah exists out of this time, like day and night. Is it open to interpretation?
All of these poems are open to interpretation, right? That's the beauty of the poems. There's multiple layers, so this is equally as valid. And that's actually the deepest interpretation. Most people read this and they see it as motivational poetry. Oh, I'm feeling down on life. Life has really got me down. But sitaron se aage jahan aur bhi hain. And that's also equally valid. Of course, this is poetry meant to uplift and upraise and motivate and inspire in multiple ways. Yeah.
I also think in his poem, The Human of Modernity, when he gave the example of like India going to the moon, but they have this real issue with like, well, issues with like, poverty. I mean, every country has poverty, but like fascists and poverty and all this stuff. And I think you can apply that to like so many other things, like yourself. Like, we want to go and do great things and achieve great things, but first we have to fix our intentions or fix ourselves. Or another way you could look at it is like, if you want to love someone, you have to love yourself first. We want to give 110% to someone else, but we don't even give ourselves 50%.
See?
So I guess that's what I got from that one.
See?
Yeah, but I really enjoyed the last poem.
I have the last poem framed on my desk next to me. So it's very profound. It's very beautiful. Any other thoughts or comments?
I kind of had one.
Yes.
When you mentioned Javed Nama,
Yes.
Circles of Eternity, you said that he went to different planets
Mm.
and he spoke with different historical figures.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of made me think about Dante's Inferno,
Yes.
when he went through the levels of hell and he spoke with like all these historians,
Mm.
historical characters.
Mhm.
Is it like that at all?
Yeah, so the genealogy of Javed Nama can be traced to Dante's Inferno,
Right.
but then the genealogy of Dante's Inferno can be traced to Miraj of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we live, and we have always lived in an interconnected world. So there are different theories on, where did Iqbal get the idea for Javed Nama, where did Dante get his idea for his Inferno, and some of them say Dante was inspired by Muslim literature on the Miraj. So I'm not an expert on the matter, but yeah. There's also Fariduddin Attar's Conference of the Birds, which is another epic Farsi work, which I will probably understand in like 20 years. But it's 1,000 years old, and Attar also does a similar thing where there are all these birds, and hence Conference of the Birds, of course, and they're seeking I can't remember, some sort of higher objective, or they're seeking some sort of salvation, and they go on a journey and they go to different mountains, and at the end they reach the highest mountain and they meet the Simurgh, which is this epic mythical Persian kind of phoenix bird. And so it's a very similar motif. It's a genre of literature called Miraj Nama, actually. I was doing
Nama the same, eternity?
Nama kind of means like book.
Right.
Yeah.
Farsi?
In Farsi, yeah. So Miraj Nama, Javed Nama, kind of thing. Or Nama can also mean like a document. Anyway. Okay. Any other thoughts?
In his couplet Miraj,
Yes.
the sailor, the Muslim is the sailor, his destination is Suraya.
Yes.
Is that like an actual star? Or is it
Yeah,
like,
yeah. So Suraya, or it's called
where does it come from?
it's called the Pleiades, is a series of very, very bright stars somewhere in the sky. People who know astronomy will know better than me. And the Suraya has been a motif in the imagination of humans for thousands of years. It comes in every civilization, and it's a series of very, very bright stars.
I think you're the brightest star. Wow.
Thank you, Bilal. By the way, your grandmother's name, Bilal, was Suraya as well. Allah yarhamah. Yeah. Okay. MashaAllah. Anyone else? Okay. Gigi.
share one thing is that इसी रोज़ और शब में उलझ कर न रह जा तेरे ज़मानो मका और भी है. So when we start seeing the complete modernity and how we're all being sort of portrayed into this capitalistic world in which everyone is just running this pursuit, this relentless pursuit of efficiency/happiness, in which everyone is just running on a treadmill, like a hedonic treadmill, like a cyclical thing. And not only in these societies, parents, the society, broader teachers, and everyone is just asking them, only if you keep running into this one, then probably at some stage there will be some salvation. So what people are doing is that the more they are working, the more they are consuming, and this whole day and night is eating everyone alive. And I quite liked it where Iqbal is asking the youth, or perhaps to all the Muslims, that it's actually all the duties of a Muslim to do day-to-day things, but it's not your ultimate thing. Muslims say, oh, love your family, do the right thing, do your job, and continue doing shifts, and then both husband and wife are just constantly working on this one. And I sort of find that in this modern capitalistic world where these inequities are and inflation is getting out of control, and such situations are being created where everyone gets so absorbed into this day-to-day that no one could ever actually imagine to come out of this whole calamity and start looking around. I'm actually really finding it's very powerful that he's asking us that, look, yes, do all day-to-day, but don't get absorbed.
And this is 100 years ago as well. Iqbal could sort of see a trajectory in Western civilization. And yeah.
And that was exactly the time when Frederick Taylor, the American industrial consultant came out, the whole sort of conveyor belt concept. So before Taylor and before this 1910, actually, a group of 5 or 6 people would make one car in Ford, and Frederick Taylor came up with the first idea that these guys are wasting the time, spending a lot of time on one product, so let's have a conveyor belt in which the person is not making the complete product. The guy with the tires is only doing the tires, so they detached the humanistic, artistic, artisan aspect and put it into this almost a conveyor belt hedonic thing. And then Ford, which was taking 6 days to produce one car, they actually started pumping out one car in 90 minutes. So the efficiency in the pursuit, and this has just not stopped. We are all being consumed by this whole pursuit of efficiency. In my clinic, 90% of my patients are just day-to-day anxieties of this daily life, and I sort of sometimes have to de-stress and let's start thinking beyond day-to-day life as well.
عشق ناپید و خرد میگزدش صورت مار. عشق چلا گیا اور آدمی کا عقل اسے دستہ رہتا ہے سانپ کی طرح. وہی ہے. ہاں. Okay. We'll finish up. Thank you all so much. And I'll read this dua again. I've been feeling this need to end these halaqas with a dua rather than just be like, okay, see you next week. So I accidentally read the dua earlier, but I'll read it again because I think ritual is important, and when we've talked about such beautiful and profound things, we should open and close them with the weight that what we've discussed deserves. So, Allahumma ya fatir as-samawat wal ard, anta waliji fi dunya wal akhirah, tawaffani musliman walhiqni bis salihin. O Lord, you are the creator of the heavens and the earth. You are my guardian in this life and the next, in this world and the next. Let me pass on as a Muslim and let me be as one of the salihin. Ameen summa ameen.